then perhaps we can get a better sense of why it has taken so long to resolve matters correctly with respect to the MEK delisting. And maybe we can understand some of that, but that does not mean we can agree with it. Or we can't conclude, as I think one of my colleagues is going to say, but since he mentioned it to me earlier, that our current Secretary of State has already had more than a year to resolve it. Don't misunderstand me. I'm a great admirer of the current Secretary of State. One of the things that does not get mentioned in my bio is that when she was First Lady and traveled abroad to our, to one of the locales in which we were engaged in conflict, I traveled with her, and I was then the Secretary of the Army. And when she cast her hat in the ring to run for the presidency, I was there too, encouraging her and hoping that she could win the leadership of this nation. I have great respect for her. I'm of the opinion that those qualities will bring her to a point where I will make a prediction others won't. That she will act, in great likelihood, after all the toing and froing, to do the right thing with respect to the MEK listing and to delist the MEK. That is not our question. Our question is when, how long, how much more information needs to be reviewed. The State Department has not even responded to the Court of Appeals ruling of last year just yet. And for that I have no answer. And I think the best we can do is to continue the pressure that you exert and that these groups exert, and that forthright statements like those made by my two predecessors can exert. But I believe there is hope on that issue. I am less than clear on what our government is going to do about Camp Ashraf, and it troubles me greatly. We have already stepped away. We've already turned it over to the Iraqi forces. And each day, our influence on the government of Iraq diminishes. Why? Because we are in the process of withdrawing. I think that as strongly and as loudly and as vigorously as we can, we need to continue to pressure the administration, to pressure anybody with any ability to have an influence on this, to see that the residents are not just protected, but are provided for going forward. I agree with what has been said about the disaster that arises if they are forced to relocate inside Iraq. I agree that the United States continues to have a responsibility for that. And I urge the United States to step up to that responsibility. There are, over the history of these issues, what are clearly three decision points. And they've been touched on already. Let me touch on them again. There was the decision point by one Secretary of State to add the MEK to the terrorist list, to the list of terrorist organizations. There was a decision by a second Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice, upon review, not to act to remove them. We now have a third Secretary of State whose duty is clear and who has the added incentive, or perhaps it's the added support. Let's assume that she wants to do us right. The added support of the decision by the court and of the continued hearings and statements from the Hill.